Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about the delay, coming on about 10 minutes late. But you are now listening to Late Night Sports Radio, the FantasyGreek.com's NFL Football Power Hour, coming to you live from parts unknown, not really. I'm Jim Saranteas. I'm in Chicago. I'm joined by Keith Grieve. Keith, say hello.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Keith's out there in lovely Rochester, New York, or thereabouts. And we are also joined by Mr. Jim Widener, the FantasyGreek.com's Green Bay Packers fantasy football contributor. Jim, say hello.
Hello.
And then there's Jim. And he's out of, as weird as this may sound, Rochester, Minnesota. So we're coming to you live tonight for our weekly Power Hour show. And before we get started, given that we're going to be talking about the Cowboys and then later on in the show, the Packers first and later on in the show, the Cowboys, I wanted to give a big shout out as sort of a lead into our Green Bay Packers segment to the American Club out there in Kohler, Wisconsin. I had the pleasure to head out there 2 weeks ago with my lovely wife, and I got to tell you, it's the place to go. Relax, rest, take a load off. They've got a great spa treatment out there. And guys, I'm telling you, if you want to do something nice for your wife, you go take her to the American Club there in Kohler. And then lastly, while you're out there, make some reservations out in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and go to Trattoria Stefano, celebrating 21 years in 2015. It's an informal setting with authentic Italian cuisine. You'll love it. I guarantee it. Mangia Italiano. Mangia. What'd you think about that,
Keith?
Keith?
That was pretty impressive.
Not bad for a kid from the southeast side.
No, not at all. Not
yeah.
at all.
Well, I actually think it's nice that we were able to follow up last week's show where we interviewed Corbin Bryant of the Buffalo Bills to move into this week and talk some Green Bay Packers football and some Dallas Cowboys football. Two of the last teams eliminated from the playoffs, and but yet two of the best teams that we've gotten to see this year. In terms of their play, probably not so much a surprise of the Packers, definitely a surprise of the Cowboys. And with that having been said, Jim, I'm going to welcome you to the show again. Jim Widener, how are you?
I'm good. This is I'm excited to be on the call and on the podcast and talk a little Packers football.
Absolutely. And for those listeners out there, if you get the inkling and you're just feeling like, man, I need to ask the following question, and please don't think that we'll ask every question. We've only got about 20, 25 minutes. You pick up the telephone and you give us a call at 585-633-7487. That's 585-633-7487. And our lovely assistant, Keith, will get you on the air. Anyway, Jim, I suppose for us to get started tonight, we should just sort of maybe back up and talk about the Packers season in general. And let me just ask you point blank, what'd you think about it?
It had its ups and downs. I mean, from the very start of being shellacked by Seattle early in the year to the offense not being up to what many expected to the famous relax comment by Aaron Rodgers to bouncing back and gaining some momentum to the defense, many questioning if Dom Capers still had it and why he still had a job to, Clay Matthews being moved inside and it seemed like changing the whole defensive philosophy and turning things around. So it had its valleys and peaks and it continued throughout the season, and it's hard to explain because there were so many ups and downs, and then they got on a good run, and then late in the season they lost to Buffalo, which was a big loss for them because that shot their home field advantage to get in Seattle in Green Bay for the NFC Championship, and obviously we saw what happened last Sunday.
You mentioned something that I think bears worth noting, and that is I'm so happy that fans don't get to run football teams. Because if they did, they're probably, we wouldn't have seen the same Green Bay Packers team that I think we saw this year. Obviously, Ted Thompson does a great job. I know you like to talk about how he's doing, especially in the preseason. And I got to ask you, speaking of Ted Thompson, what did you think about Julius Peppers being signed by the team? It ended up being pretty good, no?
It was a huge deal. I mean, since Charles Woodson left, they've been missing that veteran presence. Now, Peppers obviously doesn't have the same boisterous presence that Woodson did, but bringing in somebody with his background and all the Pro Bowls and 119 sacks, I think he started the year with. I think, don't quote me on that, but bringing him in and somebody who's the Packers haven't had the size on defense in quite a few seasons, and now they brought in Peppers, who's a beast. Then they drafted Dayton Jones 2 years ago, who's a physical monster, and started bringing in guys who are bigger. In the first round last year, he's a big safety, so that's been a huge addition to their team to bring in somebody like Peppers, and he produced. I mean, 7 sacks on the regular season, and I think he had 1.5 in the NFC Championship. And somebody who they questioned his motor many times, but I never saw that. I never saw him taking plays off. I got a kick out of the people that question the fact of in a preseason game against Tennessee, he didn't show much burst, and people were questioning if he could still play, which I found to be hilarious since it was a preseason game in a monsoon in Tennessee. And, he had 2 interceptions, I think 1 for a touchdown, and, somebody his size is just, it's amazing. And, bringing him in, I think, was a huge deal. Now, as we know, Thompson doesn't dip into free agency, but when he does, he brings in somebody who's going to help. I mean, that's a bigger type name like Woodson and Peppers. He's brought in mid-level guys, some that didn't even make the team. Matthew Mulligan's one, a tight end that got cut before the season even began last year. So, yeah, it was a huge addition, and it helped out tremendously and gave them some different looks in the schemes. They started out the year in a 4-3, scrapped that by week 3, and next thing you know, you've got Peppers dropping into coverage, and then Matthews would rush the passer, and it was interesting, and it gave Capers some more things that he hasn't been given in seasons past, and it showed.
That's an astute observation in terms of sort of the transformation of the Packers, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Where do you think that was coming from? Do you think that was Dom Capers, or possibly some combination of Capers working with his players? Because certainly the move of Clay Matthews to the inside, I don't think anybody saw that coming.
It's funny. I think it was a combination of Capers doing what he did this season with him and McCarthy. I think McCarthy finally, many have wondered why he hasn't gotten more involved on the defensive side of the ball, and I think he finally, after what happened last season, decided, enough's enough. I got to get involved with it, which a lot of people have called for. I mean, you got to get your head coach more involved. I know he's the play caller and things on offense, but I think they did a lot more, instead of so many different schemes, they went with more personnel, and that's what they said at the start of the year. And finally, it took them a while to work, to click in. And, with the Matthews move, I think it helped tremendously, and they were able to do different things, especially if Matthews playing inside, then, moving him outside at times, rushing him from the inside. I mean, it made a huge difference to their defense.
Now, Jim, you had mentioned Clinton Dix, and I remember in the preseason we had talked about, or you had talked about, sort of that was the secondary of the Packers was sort of an area of weakness that they needed to address, and they did end up addressing through Clinton Dix, and just getting some better play from the rest of their secondary, as well as being able to pressure the quarterback. All that having been said, what is your vision of where the Packers might need to address that defensive side of the ball this offseason and possibly in the draft?
It starts inside. I don't know if you want to keep Matthews playing inside. I mean, to a degree, I think he'd do a little bit, but not as a big a role as he was this season. I think you got to get him back on the outside where he can consistently, cause havoc on the opposite side of Peppers. I think you finally got to get somebody to play the inside. And, I know they wanted C.J. Mosley in the draft this last year, but he went before the Packers selected, and they ended up with Clinton Dix, which was a huge deal for him too, or a big deal. But I think they found a player in Sam Barrington on the other side of the inside, and I think your days of seeing A.J. Hawk either on this team or only, at the very most, you'll see him play minimum. If I think in my estimation, in my opinion, he's going to be asked to take a pay cut, and he's not willing to do that. I think they'll move on. It just, you can't, I understand that he led the team in tackles for, I think he's the all-time leading tackler for the Packers, but a lot of those were 9 yards down the field, and as what we called in high school, he was a pile jumper on a lot of those tackles. And
you think?
Yeah, it just, get into A.J. Hawk, it's sad, because when you saw him play at Ohio State, you saw what Clay Matthews is in the NFL, and it just never, evolved for him in the NFL. And he played in a 4-3 his first couple years, still didn't do much, and then, they kept him around. He had one really good season, the year in 2010 when they went to the Super Bowl, which ended up giving, Thompson gave him more money, which wasn't look back, wasn't the right thing to do. But, they talk about he's a great communicator. Well, I don't know what he was communicating when their defenses were so bad, but, it wasn't the right thing, So now I think that you're going to probably see them look for somebody, a bigger type thumper in the middle or in the inside, next to Barrington, who played really well when he finally started playing and took the spot of a lot of Packer fans whipping boy Brad Jones. And I think that you're going to see Barrington and probably a rookie and Hawk, if he takes a pay cut, in a backup role. But that's to me the first thing they need to look at. And they've changed the type of build that they have on the defensive line to more taller, leaner guys, except for Mike Daniels, who's more of a Warren Sapp build. I'm not comparing him to Warren Sapp, but they're going for more athletic guys, and that's what they need to do.
And Jim, if you compare anyone to Warren Sapp, you have to be concerned as to who you are offending by that comparison.
Well, there are people that will hear this and, did he just compare Mike Daniels to Warren Sapp? No, not at all. I mean,
well, I don't want to get Mike mad.
No, he's he plays with a lot of passion. I mean, you can see by his 15-yard penalty during the NFC Championship game, but. It's just I think that they've got to look on defense inside, and it looks like they've shored up the back end of with Clinton Dix and Morgan Burnett. Finally, if you give him somebody that isn't named M.D. Jennings or John McMillan, that he can play back there.
And I want to also talk about the offense. A little bit, but real quick to the listeners out there, if you've got any questions, please call us. And we got Jim Widener here, who covers the Green Bay Packers on the FantasyGreek.com. He's very knowledgeable about the team and certainly can answer any of your questions that you might have as it pertains to the team. You're listening to Late Night Sports Radio on the FantasyGreek.com NFL Football Power Hour. Jim, in terms of the offense, I mean, I wanted to start with the defense, partly because it so often gets overshadowed by the offense. Aaron Rodgers, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, and now we've got young Davante Adams. The two players I want to talk about on offense are Davante Adams and Randall Cobb. Yep. And tell me what your thoughts are on the future of Davante Adams with the team.
I think he's right now he's mid-season. He stepped up, became the number 3. He was huge against the Cowboys. I think he went over 100 yards there. Had some great touchdown runs. Played a big part of their victory against the Patriots in Green Bay late in the season. got a really good future. I don't think, if people